Hello YouTube, Knife Critics here. Today we're not going to be talking about knives, but we're going to be looking at two stoves from MSR. So this is actually in response to a video done by Waypoint Survival. He had mentioned that according to Mora, is it Kanowski? Kachansky, who is supposedly an outdoor legend. Obviously, I haven't heard of the guy, but in his video, he's mentioned that if the bottom of the pot is blackened, it will help heat transfer, specifically the radiant heat when a pot is put into a fire. So I figure what better way to test this than to use two stoves that relies heavily on not just convection heating but also radiation heating as a heating mechanism for boiling water for the most part. The first one here, as you can see, is the MSR reactor. It's the 1.7 liter. And right next to it is the MSR Windburner, both of which use very similar technology, but the reactor has been out for quite a while now, whereas the Windburner has also been out for a while, but not nearly as long as the reactor. So obviously there are some differences in the stoves. One is the 1.7 liter, the other one is a 1 liter, and as you can see, the pot bottom diameter is quite different, with the reactor being the much wider one and the Windburner being much smaller in diameter. So that will make a difference in our test today. What I also wanted to do is I'll do the factory boil, to see how long it takes to boil about 0.5 liter of water. And then I'll do that on both stoves. Then I'm going to paint the pot bottom black with some high temperature paint. And that would tell me if the black paint indeed makes a difference or not. My suspicion is that because of the fact the radiation heat is mostly in the infrared range, so the color of the item isn't necessarily the driving factor, unlike in the visible light spectrum. So for example, if you ever go out to the Middle East, all the cars that are driven there, well, not all the cars, but 99% of the cars driven there are all white. And that is because folks there want to keep their cars cool, so they would default to a white car because white car absorb less heat from the sun, which is in the visible light spectrum. But then I believe the heat produced by these stoves are going to be in the infrared spectrum for the most part. That's the main factor for the radiation heat transfer. So in that sense, even the white color is just as the emissivity of the white color and the black color, there's very little difference. So I just want to do this test and prove to myself and everybody else whether or not painting the pot bottom black will make a difference. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. We'll see. So first off, we're going to do the reactor stove, the 1.7 liter pot. As you can see here, the water temperature is about 24 degrees, and I've filled it to, I'm going to move this away now. I filled it to the 0.5 liter mark. So we're going to do the boil test in this one, and then we'll see how much fuel it used. As you can see, not sure if you can see, the pot bottom is not yet painted. It is still all factory. So we're gonna see how much fuel it used, and I'm gonna weigh the fuel as well. Turn on. The fuel I'm using is the MSR medium-sized canister. Okay, so we're about ready to go. All I've done so far is I've installed the stove onto the canister. I got the water ready. I got the timer ready. I'm gonna start up. Excuse me, I'm going one-handed here, so bear with me. And it is on. So I'm gonna put the water on, turn the heat up, and start the timer right now. So this is gonna be a little bit slower than what you will get because I'm keeping the lid off just so that we can see the boil as soon as possible, and then that way we can observe the water and turn it off right away as soon as it boils. So with only half a liter, it shouldn't take too long. According to the box that the reactor came in, it should be about a minute and a half, but that's with the lid on. I did test it. So with the lid off, it may take a few more seconds, but it shouldn't be too long. We're approaching the halfway mark, and you can already see a lot of bubbles. As it's nearing a boil, you can definitely hear the sound picking up. So that's a rolling boil right there. Just short of 1 minute and 40 seconds. So I'm going to turn that off. Okay, so I didn't let it go on for too long, and now we can measure the canister again. Just gonna let it cool down just a little bit before I take the pot off. And a lot of people like the integrated stove system. I actually like the reactor better because, you know, when you have a 1 liter pot or 1.7 liter pot, you're never gonna only go to the recommended max fill level. Most people are gonna use as much capacity as possible to maximize the capacity of their pot. So what happens is that, you know, if you don't pay attention all the time, or you glance away, you talk to somebody, there's a high likelihood that it could boil over. And it's very easy to, on the reactor, just to take the pot away from the stove and then the boil will stop. So I actually really like that. It may not be as stable as, you know, the integrated stove, but because if you look at the stove body itself, the center of gravity is so low, I think it's actually really good design, and I like the fact that you can just take the pot off and stop the boiling. Okay, so I'm gonna pause here, and I'm gonna take the canister off and weigh it. So one thing I did notice with the canister is with the stove body is that it doesn't take a lot of turns to get the stove body on or off the canister, but because the reactor stove body doesn't have the plastic bits like the Windburner does, it's almost mandatory to have some sort of heat resistant gloves, or just use the washcloth that's provided, that comes with the stove system. So that's what I did. And let's see how much it weighs now. So 367. So here we go. We have the wind burner here. Interestingly, the water temperature is a little bit lower. It's at 22.8, and that's what we'll note. And then we can account for the difference in fuel use afterwards in our final calculations. Take that away. So again, about half a liter. I already got the stovetop installed, valves closed, and we're gonna do the nope, better light it first. I'm gonna jot down the numbers. So the fuel canister that I'm using is the same fuel canister. 6 grams of fuel is not going to make a difference in terms of pressure and whatnot. And because both of those stoves have fuel regulators, so this canister is pretty much full right now. So this is not gonna make any notable difference in terms of boil time and fuel used. So note the temperature of the water. Room temperature is the same, still 0.5 liters, and we'll jot down the rest of the numbers afterwards. Okay, here we go. Get the lighter ready. Okay, it's lit. Put the pot on and turn it to max, and we'll start. So as you can see, the wind burner is definitely sits a lot higher, just because of the stove body is a lot taller. And I mean, I guess you have the option of not using the notches to kind of tie the pot to the stove. So in case you have to remove it, you can still do it fairly quick. So same thing, I'm leaving the lid off, and just so that we can see the boil as soon as possible. It's almost impossible to see through the lid when it's actually boiling because of the steam. A lot of people reports that they have issues with the lid warping. I did not experience that, so haven't been a problem for me. Here we have lots of bubbles now. And that's a rolling boil. I'm gonna turn it down. So both times the valve was turned to the max, fully open, and the time is just shy of 2 minutes and 15 seconds. So that is a significant difference between the reactor and the wind burner, but we expected that because obviously, as I mentioned before, the wind burner has a smaller pot bottom, so the surface area is very much reduced compared to the reactor. And even on the specification on the MSR website, we note that The maximum output of the Windburner is I think it's 7,000 BTU compared to the reactor at 9,000. So we expected this difference. So here's the paint I'm using, VHT flame-proof paint. It's also a header paint. It's supposed to be good temperature-wise, up to 2000 Fahrenheit or 1093 degrees Celsius. So that is very high temperature, and should be sufficient to withstand the heat that's coming out of those two stoves. So I'm gonna paint the bottoms, the pot bottoms, and we'll be right back. I just want to show the bottom of this Windburner before I paint it. Looks like so. And here's the bottom of the reactor pot before I paint it. Okay. So here we have the two bottom of the pots painted. As you can see, they're all matte black now. Let's see, before we do anything with them, so the reactor measures about 13, just short of 13 centimeters, about 12 and 12.7 centimeters, and the Windburner diameter of the pot bottom is exactly 9 centimeters. So there's significant difference between the two in terms of area and diameter. I'm just gonna, because I just painted them, I want to let them dry a little bit before I do anything with them, so that the paint actually stays on. Technically, I'm supposed to cure them using progressively higher and higher temperature, but for the purpose of this test, I don't think that matters that much, because the curing process is more for the durability of the coating rather than for heat transfer. But I will let them dry fully before I use them for boiling water again. Or come back when they dry. Realistically, I can always do a follow-on test once they are cured, and boil water again, do the time and weighing of the canisters to see if they actually make a difference. I don't think so, but we shall see. Okay, so we're back. I got the pot painted. I got the 0.5 liter ready to go. We're gonna measure the water temperature. And it's 22.7. So last time when we did it, it was 24 degrees. So I'm gonna let the water warm up just a little bit to room temperature, just so that we have comparable starting temperature. That way we can compare reactor factory versus reactor painted more accurately. So we're gonna let it sit for a while, just so that the water warms up to room temperature. But in the meantime, we can weigh the canister again. So it's 361. Oh, if it's 361, then that would mean the Windburner only used 361 or ended on 361, and the total fuel used is only 6 grams. So we're going to change that back to 6. So total fuel used is the same to boil 0.5 liters of water. The only difference is the time used. Reactor being a lot faster compared to the Windburner. Okay, 361. I'm aiming for the water temperature of 24. So we're gonna wait until it's 24 before we start. Room temperature, no change. People don't like my handwriting. I know it sucks. Same amount of water. And yeah, we'll see. So silly me, I just realized that the room temperature is actually lower than the desired 24 degrees. What I did was just using my body heat. I was putting my hand on on the pot, and then was able to warm that up to close enough to 24, and we'll get it started. Okay, here we go. Got the stove installed. Gonna light it. Put the pot on. Turn to max. And start. Oops. Let's see if it makes a difference with the painted pot now. Previous time to boil was 1 minute and 40 seconds. A minute. So not a huge difference. Maybe 2 seconds that I've noticed. It was fully rolling boil at 1 minute and 38 seconds. So 2 seconds of difference is really negligible. Could contribute to a lot of other factors. So this basically confirms my suspicion is that the radiation heat transfer is mostly in the infrared range, which is not affected by the color of the material that the heat is being transferred to. So very little difference, and I think we will see the same result with the Windburner. Let's see what happens. Now, before we go to the Windburner, we will measure the weight of the canister to see how much fuel it's used now. And we got 353. Let's jot that down. 353. Wow, would you look at that? It actually used more fuel if the number is accurate. This is 8 grams of fuel. That's interesting. Time is faster, but 2 more grams of fuel used. Okay, move on to the Windburner. Okay, so we got water temperature at 22.7 degrees. That's close enough to 22.8 that we had last time. We're gonna get started. Light the stove. Okay, start. So previous attempt, it took 2 minutes, what was the time? 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Let's see how well it does this time. Every boil, there's going to be some variations due to different factors. Sometimes a valve, even when it's open to the max, the flow rate, it could be a tiny little bit different because of the regulator. So there will always be variations that cannot be controlled. But this is not exactly a lab test either. I would call this pseudoscience at best. And we have a boil. So just short of 2 minutes and 22 seconds. This time it actually took longer than last time. So I just want to prove a point that this is done with the black bottom pot. So I'm going to dump this water out and show you the pot bottom. It is the one with the black bottom. Okay. And this is still got steam coming out. So now let's weigh the canister again after the wing burner. It's shaking a little bit. That's why the number keeps on changing. Okay, stop. Stop. It's about 347. Okay, so 347. Well, at least this the Windburner kept at 6 gram fuel use. Starting temperature was 22.7. Room temperature no change. Try to 0.5 liters. And this time is 2 minutes and I think about 18 seconds, I'm gonna call it. So really, it's hard to say that painting of the pot made a difference. I think in the case of both of those radiation stoves, the insulating property of the paint actually canceled out any benefit they might have gotten in terms of increased surface area for allowing the heat transfer to go through the pot, the bottom of the pot, and allowing the heat to be transferred into the water itself. So if there is a difference, it is minimal. So it's not going to be what Mora Kochansky said. It's not going to be like half the fuel. No way. Unless all your thermal radiation is completely done in the visible spectrum, like the sun. Otherwise, it's not going to make a whole lot of difference if you paint your pot black or not. Now, the issue that I didn't address here is that these two pots did not start off with shiny pot bottoms to begin with. They had anodized finish, which is a matte finish that is not reflective. So now, I don't know how you would do this, but somebody will have to take a like a radiant heating element to a mirror polished stainless pot bottom, and then do the test there in order to figure out if that would make any difference. I didn't record it, but I did do a test with a zebra pot that had a very shiny finish, but the heating element or the stove that I used was just a canister stove. It wasn't a any kind of stove that used that had radiant heat. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to verify if that made any difference. Now with the normal canister stove, painting the pot bottom black did not make a difference either. So that was in my mind as I come into this test, and I think I've proven that there's no point painting it black unless unless it's really shiny, it becomes like a radiant heat reflector. Otherwise, normal anodized finish, well, at least for these two stoves, which is the Windburner and the reactor, painting those black would not generate any benefit. The gram weenies will probably not be happy, because a few coats of paint will probably add half a gram or something to the entire system. But for the most part, I mean, if you really want to do it for aesthetics, go for it. It's not gonna do any damage, but it's not gonna help either. I hope this was informative. Knife Critics out.